Welcome to this LIBER and SciStarter webinar. So as you may remember, LIBER and SciStarter started to organize a joint webinar series last year, which was highly appreciated. So we decided to continue this experience. So the LIBER Citizen Science Working Group, which I am a member of, and SciStarter are very pleased to welcome you. LIBER is the Association of European Research Libraries, and SciStarter is a US based platform that connects researchers, communities, or organizers, companies, and citizen scientists. So today we will talk about effective communication in citizen science projects. Communication is, of course, crucial in all kinds of contexts, but it is of special relevance in citizen science projects, especially if you want to engage with people with diverse and a large variety of backgrounds. So for citizen science projects to be successful, we have to connect with participants, citizen scientists in all phases of the projects. It starts, of course, with recruiting people, but afterwards, well, you have to make sure that the engagement is will be sustained. So to do this, we prepared you this very nice program. First, we will have a presentation by Carina Veeckman from the Vrije Universiteit Brussel about communication and engagement in citizen science, immediately followed by a Q&A. And then afterwards, we will have an interactive workshop organized by Frank Kupper from the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam. And now I'll let my colleague Tara Cox from SciStarter introduce our first speaker.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Tara Cox. Just a little bit of background about SciStarter and myself, and then I'll introduce Carina. I have been leading the Citizen and Community Science Library Network, which is in US based, but it's been expanding globally, and it's mostly public libraries. So we're really excited to learn about the way research libraries are engaging with citizen science. And so thank you again, Sara and David, for this partnership. So let me introduce Carina. Carina Veeckman has a bachelor's degree in communication management from Arte Welt in 2006 and a master's degree in communications in new media and society from Ghent University in 2011. Carina is working as a senior researcher at SMIT in the Digital Inclusion and Citizen Science Engagement Unit, acting as the principal investigator for citizen science. She started her PhD on the democratizing effects of citizen science in 2022. The PhD is focusing on the trilemma between equality, participation, and deliberation, and the inclusion of vulnerable groups in citizen science. Carina has been involved in citizen science projects since 2016, both as a project manager, acquisition lead, and researcher. In these projects, mostly in the environmental domain, she is investigating the interplay between science, society, and technology, and its effects on civic capacities and justice. She has experience in setting up participatory governance processes in which co-creation with citizens is essential. So, Carina is a member of the steering committee of the Flemish Citizen Science Association, with whom she published a guidebook on communication and engagement strategies, and a roadmap for citizen science with and by local government. Furthermore, she is closely involved in the development of a single point of contact for citizen science within Science Outreach Office at the university, and the Open Lab initiative that unites VUB and ULB on participatory research. So Carina will be presenting the guide, Communications in Citizen Science, a practical guide to communication and engagement in citizen science, which she wrote in collaboration with Sara Talblum, Lisbeth Giesel, Hedel Develge, I should have practiced these Dutch and Flemish names, I'm so sorry, and Annelies, I don't know how to say that last name. Carina, you'll have to fill in. And her presentation will provide practical insights about communications plans for citizen science. And we're going to be having a Q&A afterwards, but I encourage you throughout her presentation to add questions to the chat as they come up, and I will facilitate that Q&A after her presentation. So Carina, please take it away. And apologies to your colleagues whose names I could not pronounce.
No, not a problem. Thank you very much, Tara, for that introduction, and thank you for having me for this talk about communication and engagement in citizen science. So what we will talk about now in the 21st minute is the handbook that we published in 2019. It's exactly this month that it's published 5 years ago. And it was based on the experience of several citizen science projects that we did and on practical experience from science communicators. The guidebook is available in Dutch and English. You can find it on the website of the Flemish Institute for Citizen Science. It's on this link, but you can also find it on the EU Citizen Science platform or on the platform of Responsible Research and Innovation Tools. Before I start, I thought to bring a common understanding once more about the term citizen science, because it might be differently interpreted from the practice that you're doing. And with this, we start from a shared understanding. So from my or our interpretation, citizen science is defined as scientific research undertaken wholly or partly by members of the public, so the lay public, non-professional scientists, but this in collaboration with or under the direction of professional scientists. So most of the times we see that this is happening in collaboration, but it can also occur independently from scientific institutes. If you look to communication or participation models of universities, we see that these are shifting from a one direction, top-down direction towards more a bi-directional way of communication, which is more collaborative, more participatory, whereby we see that citizens are no longer the target of science communication, but are involved as active participants in this scientific process. And this across different science disciplines. We have seen a rise in a lot of environmental citizen science projects, but nowadays also more and more in, for instance, the human or social sciences. As said in the introduction, citizen science is mostly being coordinated by universities, by professional scientists, but we do see a tendency that also public governments are getting more interested in it. So the reason why we published this handbook was because we saw that in reality, lots of researchers or practitioners were struggling with communication during their project. They underestimated overall the efforts it took and also the budget that was necessary for it to conduct an effective communication process. So that's why in first place we wrote a handbook to make people aware that it's a vital aspect in every step of your research process. You need communication for recruiting, engaging, informing, educating, and so on with your target audience. We're also advising that you're having a dedicated budget available for it. So we saw in the past that, for instance, some practitioners were not having budget for it, and then at the end of it, they were not able to reach their target audiences or this in a not so effective way. If you don't have the budget available, you could, for instance, look into strategic partnerships with media outlets, which has been occurring as well in Flanders. Then another aspect that we wanted to make people aware of is that communication takes practice, and in an ideal situation, this is done by a dedicated team that is taking up several roles in the process. So it might be that you have one person or multiple persons who are taking up different roles, such as a community manager who is responding to questions on a daily basis of your volunteers. That you have a science trainer available. This is someone who is looking into, for instance, writing and publishing educational packages. And then you also ideally have someone available in your team who is looking at the accessibility of the language, so making sure that scientific jargon is translated into simple and clear language. So how can you involve or engage citizens in the scientific research process? So Nowadays, and I'm sure you know lots of examples, most citizen science projects are in these two phases, so the collect phase and analyze phase. However, if you want to label your citizen science project as inclusive and democratic, we are saying now or supporting now that citizens should be engaged through the entire research process, or at least through different deliberative formats within one research phase. And to give you a practical example of how it could be done, for instance, for the first phase is the AMI project. AMI is a Flemish slang for wow, and it has, of course, the AI in it. And this project is all about AI. We are collecting ideas for societal challenges in the domains of mobility, climate, health, and work, and this through a large-scale crowdsourcing campaign. So we are going to science fairs, we are standing on the streets, we are going to libraries, where we ask citizens for their ideas, concerns, challenges they have in their daily lives, and then to translate it to a potential AI solution. Throughout the research process, we are further co-creating the idea, developing the solutions together with a consortium of partners, and then realizing it with a granted budget. And throughout this research process, we are making sure that besides the ideas, we also inform them about the technology in an accessible way, we educate them, and we debate about ethical concerns. Okay, so with that content in the back of your mind, the main content of the handbook is focusing on these two aspects. So what is a communication plan and what is an engagement strategy, and how can I set it up? So I thought it was important to make this difference, because we might all know what a communication plan is, but not so much what an engagement strategy is about. As a reminder, a communication plan is a step-by-step process in a chronological order where you explain your activities and who you are going to reach and through which communication channel. On the other hand, an engagement strategy rather looks into the motivations for participation, and this from initial to continued participation. And this is being backed up through monitoring and evaluation activities. To go a bit more in detail, what a communication plan is about. So you see here a project lifetime with a planning, life, and after phase. If you're designing a communication plan, then we advise it to already start with it before your project starts, and to reflect on all the activities that you will be doing, and to list this in a chronological order. So in this phase, you're also identifying your target audience, you're profiling them to get to know them better. You might talk already with a respective intermediary organization, and then you plan which communication channels are best to reach them. On the other hand, we have the engagement strategy. So again, you see here the project lifetime, but now we see that in the planning phase, where you are going to send your first communication message to invite them to the project, you are going to stress in your communication message the motivation why they should participate. Here, some research will be necessary to know what kind of motivation you should stress in that message. So in the beginning, we see, and we know this from research, that it are mostly altruistic motivators. Some people mostly participate because they want to learn something, they are interested in the topic, they are curious, they want to have some fun, they want to learn something. But after the launch phase, you might experience the biggest dropout. So once they have come from the decision to participate to the initial participation, and they have tried, for instance, the first time the mobile application or the sensor, we see a big dropout. And that's the point where the communication team should step in, devise a strategy that mitigates this and focuses on how to make it more accessible. So look into the jargon, look into the data protocol or the technology to see what went wrong. And again, if that is not working, you need to be creative and find additional alternatives to come into that stage that continued participation is supported. A practical example for continued participation is the Oog voor Diabetes, or translated the Eye for Diabetes project. Here, citizen scientists trained a computer model to identify the early symptoms of diabetic retinopathy. This project was accessible through the Zooniverse platform, where citizen scientists had to label images of the eye. Here you can see the usage statistics of the project with peaks and dropouts. And overall, we learned from the statistics that there were around 4,000 registered volunteers during a 1-year period lifetime, with on average 24 images that were labeled by each volunteer. And then surprisingly, the top contributor labeled 1,000 images. So what we often see is that 5 to 10% is very active in your project and is doing a lot of activity, while the majority actually is more of a lurker profile, watches and learn or participates once and then steps out of the project. So here you can also see on the graph that you have peaks of participations, then drops. Here is the period that we made the project accessible in different languages, where we saw again a peak in participation. So here the communication team can monitor it and learn if they see a dropout. This signifies that a new communication activity or push should happen in order to sustain continued participation. Then I also wanted to share 2 tips with you that are in the handbook. And the first tip is to make a difference whether you will apply a generic versus a specific targeted recruitment approach, because this will influence the diversity of your project participants. What do we mean with a generic approach? It's actually an open call. You try to reach out to as many people as possible, but you don't have any specific subgroup or profile in mind. This is, for instance, through the press, flyering, or posting on social media. So the strategy here is actually that you are relying on self-selection. People see the invitation coming by, they sign up. And from research, we actually know that if you apply this type of approach, you often will reach again and again the same type of profile. So it might lead to a homogeneous group. On the contrary, when you apply a more specific targeted approach, you are recruiting a specific number of citizen scientists with a specific also socio-demographic or economic profile in mind. And this you will do through different channels. Mostly this will happen through intermediary organizations with a specific domain and already mailing list available, or through personal invitations. This is the technique of targeted sampling, and which might lead towards a more diverse sample. A bit more in detail, because this is a type of recruitment process that we mostly apply in our projects if we want to have a more inclusive and a more diverse citizen science base. So the first step, what we do when we are designing our project, is that together with all the project members, is that we define the population and the subgroups that we want to recruit. For each subgroup, we sometimes define a specific KPI in terms of engagement. For instance, we want to reach a gender balance of 50% females, because females are often underrepresented in science activities. When these targets are set, we start with our open call, because we see that, for instance, for most organizations, libraries or civil society organizations, this is the easiest way of working. They just send out the message towards the general audience and see who reacts. Then we start with the assessment of the KPIs and the monitoring. So this always also includes a profiling with also a consent form and privacy policy to know who is participating. If we see that we are not reaching the KPIs which we are initially set, we are going to use other types of techniques. And these techniques are, for instance, a gatekeeper technique, the ambassador technique, or a targeted technique. So it are techniques to reach that specific profile eventually. The second tip is related to what I just explained. It's inclusion and citizen science. So I already mentioned when you are using the open or the generic approach that you might end with a biased profile. And this biased profile is mostly white, middle-aged, well-educated, and male. So it's the type of participant that has the capacities, the time, the budget to perform science in their leisure time. However, this can be turned around, but in the design phase of your project, you need to reflect well on the objective of the project and what you aim to achieve. And here, you need to make a balance and reflect well what you want as type of outcome. Are you designing for social inclusion, or are you rather going for scientific efficiency? Because if you're claiming or stating in your communication messages that you're, for instance, doing science for the general public, or if you are stating that you want to improve knowledge among the general population, then yes, I would say that you have an inclusive objective in mind where you want to reach everyone and ameliorate everyone's skills. So in that perspective, you would rather aim for the social inclusion objective. But it might just be that, and especially from a scientific point of view, that you just want to have data, lots of volumes of data, and that you rather go for scientific efficiency and not keeping the profile of participants in mind. This could be possible, but in the end, you should consider if this is the right option to do so, because from scientific point of view, depending on the type of knowledge that you are collecting, it might also lead to a biased knowledge because you are neglecting the knowledge of a specific group that you didn't take into account. So if you're going for inclusive citizen science, these are a few recommendations that you can apply. So I already said that you can go for the intermediary specific technique. Examples of organizations here are, for instance, poverty organizations, community centers, but also, for instance, youth centers, hobbyist groups. So both formal and informal organizations can lead you to a specific subgroup. Together with the specific subgroup that you identified, it's best to consult them to advance and set up a collaborative partnership. So with them, you are going to negotiate to see what are their needs, their wishes and requirements related to the scientific research question that you have. If you identify that, then you can further elaborate on what are the right communication channels. So are you rather using the project communication channels that you will develop, or are you going to use the channels of the intermediary organization that are already familiar for your target group? Again, pay attention to the wording of your message. It's very easy to fall into this trap because scientists are always used to writing in an academic style, but translating that in clear and simple language often takes practice. When you're organizing, for instance, focus groups, workshops, or events, also pick a time and place that is convenient for your target group. So keeping in mind, for instance, hours of when the school is ending, or Wednesday afternoons or the weekends, when is someone or not available. And then I wanted to end with this reflection. Again, relating to inclusion and democratic citizen science. The concepts that I talked about are mostly related to 3 values. So I talked about participation scale, whether or not you want to either design a small scale or a large scale citizen science project. The level of engagement, whether you're going for a contributory or a co-created citizen science project, and equality, if you want to design with a high or a low participant diversity. Achieving all these 3 values will actually be impossible. A trilemma will occur whereby you will only be able to reach or achieve 2 of them. And you need to keep this in mind because this is influencing your communication and engagement plan. And I noted down a few examples how this influences communication. To end, I'm promoting here again to have a look at the handbook and to see what's useful for designing your citizen science project. A last tip that I could give is that, for instance, in the second chapter, there are different tactics and tools mentioned. Overall, it's also practice by learning and try to be creative, try to apply a different set of tools and methods to recruit and engage your audience. If you see that something is not working, you can always update your strategy. And then at the end of the handbook, you can also find a template for starting drafting your communication plan. And with this, I want to thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you so much, Carina. That was really helpful. And there's a question, actually, Sara had a very similar question to one that I had. How can you adapt language to be more inclusive? Do you write different messages for different groups? I had the same thought, Sara, when you were talking, or Carina, when you were talking about, you know, the broad approach and how this is going to sometimes yield more of the standard, you know, participants. Are there specific strategies for women, for example, or other underrepresented groups? And what do you want to avoid?
Yeah. From the course that I followed about inclusive communication, they recommended to look to the reading and speaking skills of an audience. And we have a European system of language levels, ABC. And C is for more advanced scientific jargon, while A is, for instance, for youngsters, those who are having basic reading and speaking skills. Reading and speaking level B is the general audience. So that's the type of language that you should try to practice when you want to communicate with your audience in citizen science. You're saying if you need to adjust for specific subgroups like women, yes, I would take that into account. Related to the specific objective and theme of your project, there might be cultural sensitive or ethical issues or sensitivities that you need to take into account. So it's always best also to check with like a representative sample before sending out a text to a larger audience.
That's a great strategy. I was going to say, invite those people into drafting those communications with you before you broadly promote them. And then, you know, also something that comes to mind too is really being aware of stereotypes when it comes to STEM and science, and also representation and imagery as well.
Yes, yeah, indeed. Images can work very effectively, but also the other way around.
Exactly. So they could be barriers.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Those were great strategies. Anya has a very good question too. How do you ensure that, I think there's a couple of questions here, but let's start with the first one. How do you ensure that the citizens you invite are not perceived as free labor?
Yeah. For now, in any of the projects I did, I received that type of comment that people perceived it as free labor, because we always made sure that there was a right balance for both the scientist as the participant in added value that was generated by the project. If we see that it is asking additional time and efforts for a participant to meet at a certain place, especially for vulnerable groups, we make sure that there is a budget set aside to compensate that effort, for instance. Yeah.
I think that the second question here is, are researchers encouraged to incorporate citizen input, reciprocity? For example, can they influence the scope of the research? And then what is their reward for staying involved in the research and continuing to help the researcher? So again, that sustainability piece.
Yeah,
so that
indeed.
it's not one-off.
Yeah. Well, staying involved in the researcher and continuing to help the researcher is, for most of them, actually a motivation to stay in the project. Because the longer they stay in the project, the better they get to know the scientists and the actual topic. So we often saw in the past that a meet and greet or an informal chat with the scientist after an event was actually a motivator for them to stay in the project. In terms of types of rewards, we experimented with that. Sometimes we saw that providing an incentive worked contraproductively, and that it rather was about learning and getting to know more, learning about science, but also learning about the topic, and especially when a concern was involved in this. So, for instance, related to climate justice or health. And we always also thought about an incentive related to the theme of the project. For instance, now in one of our projects, we are rewarding participants with, sorry, I don't know the name in English, but with sustainable pens or seeds for planting, for instance. So things that are related to the topical theme of the project.
I love that. And the other thing that came to when you were talking is that building trust between the community and the researchers is so important. And there's some really good trust building strategies that, you know, from community work that can be brought into this, and just like humanizing everyone. We're all just humans trying to do this together, and building those personal relationships is super important in the sustainability piece. And why people would want to come back and contribute.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Storytelling there greatly helps as a type of tactic. Yeah.
Yes. Janae has a question. Great presentation, Carina. Do you or others have examples of effective feedback loops?
Okay, so I'm assuming here that in the stage when you've collected data, you're communicating back towards your audience about the results, and then building on top of that results, right?
That's what I had that question actually about sharing results and outcomes, but also maybe feedback loops during the design of the actual process of data collection. You know, what if something isn't working the way that the scientists envisioned in the field? How can you input the data from the community throughout all parts of the project?
Yeah, indeed. It might sometimes be overwhelming, especially when you're dealing with technology. When you're launching a technology that is not that mature yet, a lot of requests for help or emails might come in. A tactic that we applied there is that we tried to bundle the type of requests in a Q&A and publish that online. Another type of feedback loop was to organize troubleshooting workshops where people could book an appointment to have one-on-one help. Or a WhatsApp group was also one example that we saw, whereby the community is helping each other out. And in terms of like official communication or feedback, we are often using, for instance, visual materials like graphics, videos to communicate the results in an accessible way. Sometimes also a seminar or a webinar midway your project can help, and not only at the end of it, because that's something what people don't like, that lots of things are being collected and analyzed, but what does it actually mean? And if that message only comes at the end, then there might be a breach in trust creation.
Right, it goes into a black hole and then it comes out, ta-da, instead of being involved in the process, which yes, makes it makes it feel less connected. Sarah had a question, which I think you sort of answered. How can researchers manage their time with big number of participants who want to feel like they're treated as a human in the project? You'd mentioned the WhatsApp group, for example, as it, again, it goes back to community building, I think. And how do you build and sustain a community, as well as the data collection piece? Those things have to happen simultaneously.
Yeah, it's a good question. Often you see when you're dealing with a big number of participants, it relates back to the democratic dilemma that I just explained. A large-scale citizen science project will most of the time not have in-depth communication with each of the participants one-on-one. It's just impossible. We often also see that when you have a large-scale citizen science project, the level of engagement or the type of task that you're doing is of less effort most of the times when doing a co-created project. So we see that people are not always requesting then recognition, or that that the human aspect, like what Sara is posing here as a question.
But what you had mentioned before, just going back, and we've just launched a program here at SciStarter, are the ambassador piece, sort of building out like a hub and spoke system where you have some people that can serve as ambassadors for smaller groups, as opposed to just like one central hub, but like building different regional hubs or groups that can, you know, collaborate in smaller sectors, but then also be connected to the larger project as well.
Yeah, and the ambassador technique could indeed help there. Although we mostly applied it in co-created projects for now. Yeah.
Great. Okay, thank you. I think I'm going to pass it now to David to introduce our next panelist.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carina.
Yes, thank you, Tara, and good evening. It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Frank Kupper. Frank Kupper is an independent researcher, facilitator, and theater maker, and at the intersection of science and society. With his company Mens in de Maak, he creates meaningful public conversations about science. As an associate professor in public engagement at Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, he leads the Science in Dialogue network, aimed at the integration of engagement and dialogue in research practices from start to finish throughout the university. His overall mission is to create more openness and dialogue in the relationship between science and society. And in this interactive workshop, we are invited to explore the art of dialogue, what it takes, and how dialogue can contribute to a sense of humility, openness, and reflexivity. Frank, the floor is yours.
Thank you, David, and hello, everyone. I will start sharing my presentation. Here it is. Yeah, so I am not a librarian, and I am also not involved in concrete citizen science projects that much, but I have a lot of experience in engagement and dialogue between universities and society. So I have done a lot of projects where I combine traditions like ethical reflection, public engagement, and responsible innovation to help researchers engage with society, broaden the reflection on their research, and in the end also make their research better aligned with values, needs in society. So that is what I do, and I would like to take you through a number of ideas and experiences we had at the Vrije University in Amsterdam. And often when I talk to scientists about this at our own university or other European universities, I often start with the question, why don't they listen to us? Because that is I think a frustration that scientists more and more have. Of course, you can answer this question in many different ways. Just as a thought starter, I'm curious to hear what your ideas are. So why don't they listen to us? Take a minute to reflect on this question and then put your short answer in the chat, please. So I see several answers that relate to the complexity of science or the complexity of the issues that we talk to, and that can push people away or make it difficult to comprehend. I also see questions or answers about relevance. So in how is this relevant to me, to my perspective? And also communicating, like Iris says, is about getting to understand each other's perspectives. And I think one of the most beautiful definitions of communication is as follows: communication is missing each other's point as closely as possible. So we can never really understand each other, but at least we can try. So I think in the world of science communication, where I come from, we increasingly see that science communication is more important than ever, but also more challenging than ever, and that is related to changes in the relationship and interaction between science and society. And just to highlight a bit of this context, first of all, we see that the boundaries between science and society are blurring for the past decades. And citizen science is, of course, a very powerful example of that. And so science is not, or the authority of science is not taken for granted anymore. The justification of what happens in science has moved to the public arena, where scientific ideas or theories or suggestions are openly contested, and more people share their concerns. And then at the same time, there is also the digitalization of society that has increased the number of people that take part in these discussions. As something that we have, of course, seen in the pandemic, where we got to witness science in the making, and everybody could tap into conversations, for example, between two epidemiologists discussing the transmission model for the COVID virus. Those kind of conversations with a lot of uncertainty and ambiguity would normally take place in a conference or in a bar after a conference, and now they took place on at that time Twitter, and everybody could tap into it. So this is I think this blurring of boundaries intensified by digitalization is still something that we are trying to address, trying to deal with. So if you think about the public conversations about science, this has had several consequences. I outline a few here. More actors are part of these public conversations, and therefore also more issues are part of the conversation. And it is something that scientists usually really have to get used to, because often it's in their mind that they are the ones to define the issue based on their expertise. But more actors just bring in their own issues. And science is only one ingredient of those conversations. These conversations are also about a lot of other aspects, social, economical, lifestyle, individual experience. And if these different ingredients are not addressed well, this can lead to more conflict and polarization because we are not able to deal with our differences. So, if you, for example, take the pandemic or climate change or the introduction of artificial intelligence as an example, we can say that the issues that we face are increasingly complex in the sense that they have a lot of different aspects and issues. They are uncertain in the sense that these developments are open-ended. We don't know what to expect, and ambiguous. We can interpret these developments from these issues from different perspectives. So this is something that is complicating the public conversations about science. I have led a European research project called Rethink about these issues, and we did empirical research in several different countries where we got together scientists, science communicators, journalists, amateur science communicators, artists, policymakers to actually experiment with different forms of science communication, different ways to shape these public conversations about science. And I think the most important implication was that we need to reverse the direction of this relationship. And citizen science has the potential to do that as well, although I think Carina also already showed that this is not in all citizen science projects the case, and easier said than done. So our recommendations to reverse the direction was, first of all, to take an ecosystem view. So don't focus on your message, your target groups, but take a step back and zoom out and see who's there already taking part. Start with the social issue rather than the scientific knowledge or breakthrough or theory. And don't tell people what they should know about science, but connect to the conversations that already take place. And I think, of course, there are a lot of differences, but in my trainings, I see a lot of scientists that implicitly have the idea that the conversation only starts after they have shared their scientific message. But what actually happens is that people already are part of different conversations, and they make sense of that information in their own way, relating to those conversations they already have. So this means a shift from information to dialogue and deliberation. This is a shift that has been going on since the 90s, you could say, but I think still requires work and training to help people to actually do this. And then I would now like to go to a first interactive moment in this workshop. Because after I've shared these changes in the relationship between science and society, and this idea to reverse the direction of interactions between science and society, I would like to ask you the question, what is the potential role for libraries here? So you will be randomly assigned to different breakout rooms for 7 minutes. Have this conversation. I will share my last slide with these directions of as a conversation starter. So once you're in that room, I will share the text with you via the chat. Have fun discussing this question from all your different angles, and after 7 minutes you return and put your answer, or one of your group puts your group answer in the chat. So thank you for sharing those ideas in the chat. Anja Pedersen, do you have the opportunity to open your microphone and share what you and your group meant by being credible communicators?
Well, I can try. So it's like if we can lend out books, we could also lend out citizen science. So we could engage the public as a trustworthy partner. And we can also facilitate the public need for certain research from scientists. So I think it's a reciprocal action.
Okay, yeah. So so both share or offer scientific resources, but also facilitate the needs of.
Yeah, but you could also engage quite much. As I'm allocated at the University of Southern Denmark's library, and in our library we have a center for citizen science. It's not owned by the library, it's just situated in the library. And many of my co-librarians, colleagues, are also affiliated to that center of citizen science. So we have like different kind of steps, like we can just promote a certain project and try to find citizens who want to do it. But we can also ask the citizens, what do you need? What kind of research do you need? What do you want for your tax money? But we also sometimes get huge funding, and then we make a competition, and the researcher who has most votes will get the money.
Yeah, so that's a very direct form of feedback.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Sara, what did you mean with share different kinds of materials?
So in my group, we talked about the differences between different kinds of libraries. So you have public libraries who are very far in organizing building bridges in different ways, organizing new kinds of workshops, bringing people together, and then we started talking about content related things which are something that research libraries are very strong in. And then we said, well, actually, libraries can also lend out different kinds of materials that can be used in citizen science projects, or make content available that can be used in projects.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think also the answers that you give reflect that when the relationship between science and society is changing, also the role of libraries, whether they are academic or public libraries, in this knowledge transaction is changing. So of course, not only the relationship between science and society is changing, but science as a community, as a system itself is changing. So we no longer look at science as a closed system with its own methods and rituals, and other scientists as the most important audience. But we now are for a while already in a transition towards open science, which this transition I sometimes compare with a zipper. That so the whole research process is opened from the back end of the process. So open access, sharing publications and results, to the very beginning of the research process, agenda setting, defining problems and asking questions, and all forms of interaction between science and society, whether it's public engagement, living labs or citizen science are, I think, part of that transition. And they all require some form of dialogue. Also, when you give a public lecture or when you share your publications with open access, there is some kind of dialogue is required. And that is also, I think, why many people in the open access field talk about meaningful open access. Just putting the publications out there is not enough for people to make sense of it, to relate it to their own context, to their own perspective. So you need to have some kind of process in place that makes open access meaningful. So here I show you a picture that is known as the public engagement onion. You see a diverse range of interactions between science and society that have been developed either to inform people about what happens in science or to engage people in science, to have a dialogue and also steer the direction of science. In the past decades, we've seen a shift from information to dialogue. But I think it's important to note here that just making a change in the format or the different audiences that you target is not enough. It also matters largely how you do it, with what kind of mindset, how you design the interactions that take place within such a project. And also your promise, what do you do with it? How is it going to enrich your thinking, or how is it going to help your research? So that means that we should focus not only on these interactions themselves, but also on the mindset, the interaction, and the integration into practice. So what openness to society implies is that we don't see science and society as separate worlds. We recognize that research and education are valuable for all, and that knowledge is produced in various places involving a variety of actors, and dialogue contributes largely to that. So I've been talking about a shift in understanding of the science-society relationship as a system with fixed boundaries and a more unidirectional flow of information, to a system that is much more fragmented and open, and with a lot of different interactions, and also libraries and academic libraries can play a part in that. So we move from a linear closed system to a more dynamic and open system, and that also has a different role from scientists to collaborate or co-create knowledge, and also from intermediaries like libraries. And that's also in the examples that you gave after the breakout room discussions, have a role to play as a broker to mediate between different perspectives, a role as a facilitator to help design and facilitate interactive processes, and to help people to acquire the right mindset with the openness and reflexivity that you need to really understand the other and the other's perspective, and to help these collaborations to move towards change. And I would like to, I would like to give you an example of what we have been doing in the past year and the years to come at the Vrije University, as part of the Open Science program that is situated at the university library. we have created a network for science in dialogue. And in line with the current trends in thinking about public engagement, we not only included the hardware of engagement here, but also the software and orgware. The hardware you could see as the methods, tools, and guidelines that help people to structure their to come up with a strategy to structure their communication. But usually we have noticed that that is not enough. We also need what we call software. So pay attention to the mindsets of people, to their values. Creates room for these engagement processes. And also the orgware, the organizational and institutional conditions are important. For example, to sustain these processes, to sustain these collaborations, and also to reward not only citizens but also scientists that take part in these projects for this. So we've seen often that the beautiful initiatives end when the project money is gone. So organizations like the university have to come up with something to prevent this. So what we have created is the Science in Dialogue Network. It's an initiative for the whole university to encourage the integration of dialogue into research practices, with the ultimate goal to enhance the mutual understanding between scientific researchers and their citizens and stakeholders, and to create more alignment between the research that takes place at our university and the values and needs in society. We have the idea that a network organization can provide this structure where researchers with different perspectives can come together and learn about how to do this, how to make dialogue part of their research. And I have to finish. I have two examples for you, examples of the things that we do in order to help people to get into the right mindsets and to create this space for the right kind of interactions. We have dedicated training sessions that we offer to our researchers. So, for example, dialogue skills like listening are something that we train. But also, how do you shape a value inquiry? So, how do you make sure that conversations are not only about the exchange of facts, but also go deeper into the underlying values and assumptions that people have? We have training sessions about how to use arts to help people to get into dialogue. And current themes of interest like polarization and uncertainty, we help our researchers to deal with this in the context of dialogue. So that is one thing that we do. And another pilot that we have started is the Dialogue Incubator. This is an individual learning trajectory where a group of selected researchers experiment with dialogue interventions in the context of their own research. So they have a learning trajectory where they get together in workshops where we train them, they help each other with intervention. And we also offer them tailored advice to really experiment with dialogue. And examples of this are, for example, there's one environmental humanities scholar that is writing a history of the impact of natural gas. And these kind of histories are usually only written from an academic perspective. And she wants also to include local citizens around natural gas installations in the Netherlands in writing this history. There's another example about making gender a part of the conversation between takers and clients. And there's an example connecting researchers and policymakers about welfare payments. So you see issues, really social issues, where there are also public values and needs at stake, and researchers having the desire to connect to different groups of citizens and stakeholders to enrich their research. And with such a pilot, such a program as the Dialogue Incubator, we hope to encourage our researchers to really do this and make their research more responsive to what happens in society and more reflexive of the role of science in society. I think I will leave this here. And if there are questions, then I can still respond to it. And otherwise, I give the floor back to David.
Thank you very much, Frank. Are there any questions from the audience? Sara asks, can you tell a bit more about the dialogue training?
Yeah, what do you want to know?
How did this go in practice? I mean, well, you explained how you meant that you organize training about dialogue skills and value inquiry and art-based methods. These things, well, sound really great. How can I apply them, well, within my university, let's say?
Yeah, what we are doing now, so we just created this network, so that's why we call all these activities pilots. So we are developing these training sessions, and then the next step. So first we just do them to see how they work, and then the next step is to integrate them in the in the range of trainings that are offered at the university, and that might also be a moment where they could also be offered to other institutions. But for example, a dialogue skill training is a 2 or 3 hour training where we focus on specific skills like listening and speaking, and we train different aspects of listening. So how do you listen without judgment? How do you listen deeper? So how do you also not only listen for what people say, but also what kind of values or emotions they express? But also speaking, how do you speak up in a dialogue? How do you share what you really feel? Because that is something that we also notice, that sometimes people also find it difficult to share their emotions or their feelings. So this is something that we train in interactive exercises, so either individual exercises in pairs or in groups, role play settings. And then there are also other trainings, for example, about different roles for scientists and intermediaries that I talked about. So the roles as broker, facilitator, change agent. And that is more set up more like a reflection workshop where we help people to reflect on the role they generally take, and then get them also to think about these other roles and what that would mean for them. So these are 2 examples. Polarization is another example where we use a specific model of, and we help people of polarization, and we help people to understand a specific social issue based on that model, and then think about strategies of how to deal with it. So, for example, in this model, they say that it's better not to focus on the extremes, but to focus on the silent majority. because the extremes, they don't have the intention to listen to you or to change, but there's a very large group in the middle that is more open to change.
You put a lot of emphasis on the hard, deep work it takes to have this kind of mindset shift. But Anja Pedersen, she liked it very much, but she asked, are there any super easy top 10 tricks a research library can do to do what you suggested?
Super easy top 10 tricks. That sounds too good to be true. So honestly, I think it is a lot of hard work to really do this. But on the other hand, you could also just start. So like by just going out there or practice dialogue or the mindset exercises yourself. It's hard to answer this in a more general way, but it makes me think, for example, about a conversation that I had with this environmental humanities scholar that really wanted to write a more inclusive history of natural gas impact in the Netherlands. And there's she experienced a large gap between her community of academic scholars that are in the business of writing these histories and the local citizens that were actually living in the impacted areas. And then a very easy trick, I think, is just to go there, just to start doing it. Just go there, go to a local pub and talk to people. It's I think a start. At least for her, that was an important step to break out your own bubble.
Yeah, so I was wondering, you talked about the training and the dialogue training sessions you gave. Can you give an example of a researcher who really changed his or her practices and came back to you to share what kind of shift this was in his research?
A lifetime shift. There's one example comes to mind. I think what these one of the powerful elements of these kind of trainings is that they are very they really trigger your self-reflection. So there is a researcher that came to me after a session recently. She said, now I realized that my own passion, my own commitment to my good cause is actually in the way. So that's what's driving me to these people that I really want to communicate with. But at the same time, I now realize that this passion is actually in the way of really engaging in a dialogue with them, because I'm so passionate about this that I just want to get my message across. And now she's more aware of that and trying to suspend her own ideas a bit more.
Well, thank you very much, Frank. And we are almost at the end of our session. So I would like to give the final word to Sara to wrap it up. And Sara.
So thank you very much for these very engaging talks. I think we had great speakers today. So we learned from Carina how we can engage with use different communication strategies, and we gained various insights from Frank and his expertise in dialogue. With this, I would like to thank you all for attending this session, and see you for next LIBER webinar. Thank you very much.